begin the recording and we will get started. Okay. Looks like we're rolling now. Thank you so much for joining us. My name is Jana Saylor, and my pronouns are she and her. I am the artistic director and founder of the Vancouver-based Allegra Chamber Orchestra. I'm coming to you today from the traditional territories of the Blackfoot Confederacy. That is the Siksika, Kainai, Piikani, the Tsuut'ina, Nakota Nations, and also the Métis Nation Region 3, currently known as Calgary, Alberta. In case you're not familiar with Allegra's mandate, we are a fully professional, all-female identifying orchestra, and our mandate is to champion the works of female and minority artists and composers. And over our 5-year history, we have commissioned at least 2 to 4 works per year, and the majority of our 20-plus engagements have included a Canadian, if not a world premiere, of a female or minority composer or artist. So this workshop that you're taking part in today is part of the Composer Incubator Mentorship Program for female and minority composers. And we currently have 6 wonderful mentees paired up with prominent mentors from across Canada. And their works will be featured as part of a live stream festival at the end of June. And so we will spread the word about that. Hopefully you can join us and cheer them on as they go through the process. We're delighted to have you here as part of these professional development workshops that we are making available to the community. It's wonderful that we can come together to learn and grow as artists and professionals. And this wouldn't be possible without the generous support of the BC Arts Council and the Vancouver Cultural Services Office. So today's workshop on writing for harp is presented by composer Rodney Sharman and harpist Albertina Chan. The workshop will be approximately 60 minutes in length, and as mentioned, we will make time for Q&A as we go. So just a few things about Rodney before we get started. Rodney is an award-winning composer, and he teaches composition at the VSO School of Music currently. And in the past, he has been a composer in residence for early music, Vancouver's New Music for Old Instruments, the Victoria Symphony, the National Youth Orchestra of Canada, the Vancouver Symphony, and the composer-host of the Calgary Philharmonic's New Music Festival, among many other things. And he's no stranger to all of us that work and thrive in the Vancouver music scene. And Albertina Chan, our harpist today, is a versatile performer and has worked with the Vancouver Symphony, the Turning Point Ensemble, Music on Main, Arado Ensemble, and has taken part in many prominent Canadian premieres over the years. So we're delighted to have both of these wonderful presenters with us today. I'm looking forward to a really wonderful workshop ahead. So welcome, Rodney and Albertina, and I'll turn it over to you.
Thank you so much. I'm coming to you from the unceded territory of specifically the Musqueam people here in Vancouver. And Albertina and I have structured how we're going to go about presenting the harp to you. So if you could leave your questions to the end, that would actually be helpful to us. And we're starting in a place that composers rarely think about when they're writing for the harp, and rarely think about when they're writing for the piano also, and that is the relative duration of pitches as after they are plucked. Once struck, how long they ring, because in the lowest part of the harp, they can ring for a very long time, and at the top of the harp, the sound can be, well, under a second. So for example, writing a high chord as a whole note, well, it might be the duration, but you'll probably only hear a small fraction of that ring. Now we're on Zoom, and Zoom is designed to enhance clarity of the human voice. So we'll do the best we can. You're going to have to trust Albertina when she says this note is still ringing. So I'd like Albertina, would you please start by showing us the timbre changes and the duration changes from the top to the bottom of the harp, and show us just how long one of those low notes will ring?
Yep. Okay, so I'm just going to start with a random high note up here. You can hear that. So that faded pretty quickly. If I put it in a chord, you can cheat and make it sound a little bit longer. Okay, I'm going to move down an octave. So first that was this top one. So it's faded out now. And then here. And then.
Albertina, I'm sorry, you're going to have to tell us when the sound stops because
Oh, okay.
Zoom's only giving us part of it.
Okay, so for instance, when I'm up here, it stopped now. Here. And it's fading now.
12 seconds.
Yep. And then here. And it's starting to fade now. Okay, and that's fading. And then. And here it's interesting because it's such a low wire, it's still actually vibrating, but then the sound is gone now.
I had the experience in a recording session in Toronto where the harpist was playing a piece of mine. We did a take and we could tell that something was different. And it was Erica Goodman. And in my piece, there had been a single low note that had been struck probably 10 bars before.
Mm-hmm.
But still, it was like it changed the quality of the silence, even because it was still ringing a little bit. So we had to go back and do the take again from before where she played that low note, even though it was maybe 20 seconds, 30 seconds later. The low note.
Yes. So what I would say would be a good tip for composers is if you're writing something in the lower register and you definitely want that sound cleared away, make a note to muffle and then the harpist, but you also need to have like a rest moment in the left hand that allows the harpist to give it that time to dampen the strings, if that makes sense.
And we all know this. We all know the sign to make a harpist damp the strings. Yes. Let's see if I never have any paper that I'm trying to be a good citizen of the earth, and I have never have any paper that doesn't have something written on it already.
It just looks like this.
Oh, perfect. Thank you.
Oh no, sorry. Can you see it? No.
Sort of like a modified bullseye.
Yes, yes.
Awesome. Now, everyone can see that that the strings are of different colors. Could you explain that, please?
Yes. So the strings help us identify what note is what. So you'll see red strings. So those represent all the C's in the octave, and all the black strings represent all the F strings. So the thing about the harp is that you can imagine it being like the white keys of a piano. And then to get the black keys, what we actually have to do is physically shorten each string. So I'm gonna move you. So I'm gonna have you guys look up at the top here. So right now, I'm gonna have you see around here or here. And then did you see that movement? Okay, good. And then, so that changes it one semitone higher, and then it can go one more. So then there's two adjustments that can be made to make the original sound pitch 2 semitones higher. So if I didn't replace my fingers, what you'll just hear is this. And how I activate that is actually through my feet. So like that. Okay.
Now, the natural scale of the harp is C flat major. So when the pedals are completely open, the harp is at C flat. And there are pedals then, just as we saw, that move every string of that note name one semitone higher. So you change the C flat to C, every note on the instrument moves to C natural. Change it again, every note changes to C sharp, except for the two lowest notes of the harp. And
yes.
Even Benjamin Britten makes this mistake in the turn of the screw. He changes the low pitches, and they cannot be changed except by laboriously tuning the string. So the two lowest notes of the harp don't move. The two lowest notes of the harp don't move. You can listen to this recording and hear me say that 3 times.
Yes. And on some harps as well, the very top string also doesn't move, or it moves maybe one.
Which notes are those, and is this on all harps?
So it's not, and that's the thing, it's not consistent. Some harps they do, some harps they don't. So it's safer to just leave that high G as a single pitch that doesn't need to be changed, because then we can just tune it beforehand to whatever pitch is wanted, whether like it's a G sharp or G natural or G flat.
It's more color anyway. When it's that high, it's not going to make that much difference. So you could see why I'm
yes. Yeah.
Now,
and actually, I was going to say the same thing about the two lowest ones, because they're so low. The center of the sound, it's really wobbly. It's not really clear. So those aren't really great pitched notes either. They're really to add resonance to the instrument.
Now, you and I both worked with Rita Costanzi.
Yes.
And Rita taught me the quick and dirty way of learning harp pedals. Starting with your left foot. Did Columbus bring enough food going to America? That is the order. 3 with your left foot, 4 with your right. D, C, B, E, F, G, A. Now, as a composer, this isn't going to make a lot of difference to you unless you want a lot of chromatic changes very quickly, in which case it makes a great difference to the harpist who actually, I've seen this, will move their feet from one side of the instrument to another to do a fast, I wish you could have seen my feet there, to do a fast foot movement to change pedaling. Um, sensitive composers leave generally one or more notes in between changing a, a pedaling. So, for example, if you want a C and then a C sharp, it's much better to figure out how it's tuned so that you move from C to D flat instead. Um, could you play? I've brought one of my pieces in to show you. It doesn't have any part pedal markings in it. I left that to the harpist. That's something I learned later, but I always keep track of where the pedals are. I'm just going to share the screen with you. This is a little piece I wrote way back. Hold on, I should be able to do it. Host has disabled participant screen sharing, Jana.
You are the host now,
Okay.
so you're good. Should be.
All right. Here we go. This piece is like a minute long.
So this is the dances, yes, the suspended waltz.
The suspended waltz. Thanks, Albertina. Now, composers, you'll see there's a, oh, it didn't do what I wanted it to do. You bad annotating device. Is it still blue? It is. Damn it. I just actually said, I actually pressed clear and it didn't work. All right, I'm going to do this. Still not working. Okay, forget it. I'm going to do this. All right, so here we have a D flat and an A flat, and here we have a D natural and an A natural. So the harpist has time in here to change it, and they will figure out when and where to do that. There's a full note here so that they can change this D natural to D flat, and this note will cover the pedal change to A flat, and so it goes throughout the piece so that the effect is seamless and you never hear the feet moving, because sometimes you do, especially in a fast, especially if the pedal changes are fast, and especially if the piece is soft. So I'll send this all to you as a PDF. so that you can look at it for yourselves and see how that is accomplished. Now, but the best way, if you want to write a really quiet piece, is not to have any pedal changes at all. And you can achieve something quite chromatic doing that. I wrote a little piece in memory of my friend Michel Georges-Bréchamp, who died of AIDS way back in the 1990s. And so there are 45 chords. He lived to only age 45. So it's a kind of little tombeau piece. So I'll have Albertina play it for you now. I'm just going to share the screen so that you can see that score.
I was going to also add one thing. So about this piece, Rodney has indicated that he wants a special effect called près de la table, which means playing close to the soundboard. So you'll see, instead of my hands being more in the middle of the strings, hopefully you can see that it's closer to the soundboard, and that gives it a different quality to the sound.
Thank you, Albertina. So that's près de la table, and you can see how chromatic the music can be um, without uh, without having to change a pedal once. You just have to choose your notes carefully, and as you see, these strange spellings are essential to the harpist in order to learn how to do it. If I had just written that in flats, it would not have been possible. So you have to uh, spell the notes accordingly in order to make it possible for the harpist to play. Now I don't know. I worked when I was a young man with uh, Erica Goodman, who told me that I'm the only composer she's ever met who doesn't make a mistake when they write for the harp. But the reason that I never make a mistake is that when I was 21, I did. I wrote a piece with a harp in the orchestra. It was a chamber opera, and the harpist was Taka Kling, and Taka Kling um, took me aside, showed me exactly why things didn't work. we're in a pandemic. It's impossible for you to have intimate time like this with a harpist. But at your first opportunity, spend some time, look at their feet, look at their fingers, see what's happening. Now, there's one obvious thing that I've neglected to mention to you, and that is that the harp is played only with three fingers and the thumb, not the little finger. So all these 10-note chords that you see in pieces of Murray Schafer and others, they've just made a mistake. So do you ever, as a special technique, play with 10 fingers?
No. It's really, so the harp is very physical. So you have to just think of like the body mechanics. So there's not even really a way that, like, if I try to put my pinky finger on, it just doesn't really have strength. So it's just not played with that. So yeah, what feels really comfortable are like 4-note groupings. So actually I have a little, let's see. Yeah, here's a little just excerpt from a piece by Notated. I'm just going to play a little clip, and this will show some of the 4-note patterns, and also it'll have a little PDLT, Près de la Table section. So hope you can hear that. So that just gives an example of just the way like fingers fall in and patterns that are really, that work well on the harp. And hopefully the contrast between the normal section played in the middle of the strings with the PDLT was evident there.
Now, the harp, of course, is played with two hands, and your left hand is on the your left hand plays the bass notes usually, and the right hand plays the higher notes usually, and that means that if space is like if you're playing a major chord, for example, as 4 notes, that the distance to pluck is perfect. Third, 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 fourth. This space is wider. So, for example, if you're writing 4-note chords and you're wanting a second and then a sixth and a third, sometimes chords are not physically possible because of the distances between fingers. However, the harp is awesome in that what feels like an octave on the piano is a tenth on the harp. So tenths on the harp are as easy or as difficult as an octave is on the piano. Can you show us that? Can you give us a close up or?
Yep. Let me see. Can you actually see this or not? So this is in the lower range. The other thing I would add for Rodney is that the string width, the distance, it's wider between the lower strings compared to like up top here. I don't know if you can see, it's a lot tighter up here. And also, if you can see, like the distance where I have to play the strings is very small. So you don't want a lot of like busy work up here, because really the motion, it's very difficult unless you're maybe splitting with two hands. Like I could put, right now, versus like down here, there's lots of room so I can maneuver. Because one of the main actions with the harp when we're playing is we're closing almost into a fist. So when I'm up here, I actually don't even really have that physical ability to really properly close into my fist. So it's fine for like soft stuff up here, just for color, but you're not going to write like fortissimo up here and expect anything fast up here. So I can actually just, so back to, okay. So here's showing 10th, and I could probably even stretch if I'm up here to 11. Because the higher I go up the harp, the less distance between the strings.
Now, I want to talk before we speak more about extended techniques, and I know you've prepared some examples for us. I'd like to talk about a couple of ordinary things that actually require quite a lot of effort on the harp. Could you tell us how you play a trill?
Ah, yes. Actually, I had an example later. Okay, so trills are actually a great effect on the harp because unlike other instruments, you can trill with like, you can even do like 6-note trills. So I'm just gonna do a CD trill right now. The other thing you can do is use harmonics.
I'm sorry, Albertina, you played that with 2 thumbs, correct?
No, I'm using my second and index finger and thumb in one hand, and then same on the other hand. So it's alternating these two. Another thing you can do, because with the harp, we have all these pedal combinations that we could do. Let me see. I'm just... So here I'm repeating, even though I'm using 4 fingers, there's only 3 different pitches. And that's because of the enharmonics that we can use with the pedals, because I can set my harp into having both D flat and C sharp at the same time, which would give that. So there's also something I guess called the Bisbigliando effect, which is in essence just trilling with different fingers. So I can make...
Albertina, would you mind showing us that with just 1 pitch on 2 strings?
Yep.
Now this is super important, because imagine a string is vibrating and your finger comes to it and it stops it before it plucks it so that it vibrates again. So by having 2 that are tuned the same, the sound is always refined and overlapping, and if you like a little bit, if you think about dry acoustics, wet acoustics, it's a little bit less. By using 2 strings, you have it more resonant, more wet, if you like. Could you show us what it sounds like if you're playing just the 1?
If I was just doing 1 string, it's really short.
And now 2? Oh, with Zoom, unfortunately, you like, you can hear the difference, but you can't hear it super clean. You just have to trust us.
Let me see if I try to put it louder. So that was 2 versus 1.
Okay, thank you. Now we need to talk about harmonics.
Yep.
The standard way of writing harmonics is the way that I do it. It's you write the note that it's played on and it sounds an octave higher. So for example, in Suspended Waltz that Albertina played at the beginning, there were some unisons of harp, ordinario, and a harmonic at the same time. This is standard. If you're going to do it where the note sounds as written, then you have to write suoni reale or write real sounds. But I'm a big advocate of just having the harmonic sound an octave higher than written.
Yes.
And they are only good from the first nylon string, which is G, the lowest G of the cello, to F. We're talking written, so they're sounding an octave higher. F, so it goes from the lowest line of the bass staff to the highest line of the treble staff, but then sounding an octave higher. Could you show us how harmonics work and how you play them?
So this would be the sound without a harmonic. That would be the sound with the harmonic. I'm going to do it more mid-range because these ones generally are ring better. So you get the octave difference. And then up top. So one thing to also remember, because of the length differences in the strings, the shorter ones are also not going to be quite as resonant and ring as long as the ones lower down. So if I was doing something here, it's a much quieter, delicate sound up near the top. So you don't want to have really too much else going on if you want these higher harmonics to sound.
Shostakovich is a big fan of writing harmonics in unison with the celesta, which has an absolutely gorgeous sound. You can look at it in his orchestra pieces. There's some marvelous moments with it in the Fifth Symphony, where in the slow movement the violins and the low strings are holding this perfect fifth, and then the harp and the celesta play the third of the chord. It's ravishing.
Mm-hmm. It's supposed to give like what we call a bell-like sound. So
we just have a quick question about the range. Holly is asking, is that written G2 to F5? Is that the range that you're referring to?
It would be an A for the lower. It's really just the A on the bass clef, that A, the lowest, and then the F sharp in the treble clef, the highest.
We see. I never learned those numbers. I went to school.
Yeah, neither did I.
I went to school in Germany, so those numbers don't make any sense to me. What is Jana, do you understand those numbers?
Somewhat. I mean, in regards to the piano register, but
so isn't it the G though, not the A that is the first harmonic?
The G is a wire string.
Okay.
So technically you could do it, but it's
you don't like it as
going to
much.
have a different sound as well.
Okay, so that A is 1/6 above the lowest note of the cello. Is that A2? I think that's A3, isn't it?
It's 2 A's below middle C.
I don't know what these numbers mean.
All right. Well, why don't we
Well,
for
Donna, do
now?
you know what those numbers mean?
And
Well, I mean, look.
Okay.
Okay, here we go. I will show you. And we're gonna do it. So it's that A
Yes.
to this F sharp sounding 1 octave higher.
great. Thanks for clarifying. A couple of comments. There's some disagreement because of the electronic keyboard companies number it differently. The numbers are a problem because there are 2 different versions an octave apart. So that's part of the issue. But thank you for clarifying. I think that's very clear now.
Okay, now, Albertina, can you show us all the fancy stuff? Are we ready for fancy stuff? Glissandi, both strummed and manipulated.
Sure. So probably one of the things like people associate most with the harp is the gliss. So, which is just that sound. So the thing you can do that makes the glisses more interesting is manipulating the pedals to get different things. So on a piano, you would never be able to do this. Like that kind of gliss sound. So again, with Harmonics, you can make 5 different pitched scales that you're going up or something like that. Let's just see. So the combinations for that are pretty much limitless. Certain effects would be using a gliss technique. And this is actually something called like a thunder sound in the strings. And you're using the bass wires. So what in this effect, we're taking advantage just of the materials of the string and also the fact that they just keep vibrating. So this is going to be loud. I'm just going to stop that, otherwise it might ring forever. But that is also just using a gliss technique, but really just really fast. Did you have any other questions about that? The glissing, you can. Oh.
What about the actual glissando that you make with your tuning key? Composers love that. And
okay.
So,
yes.
But I know it's going to be a question, so we might as well do it.
The funny thing about that is they actually don't even. So you don't necessarily need to use a tuning key, but you need to use something metallic. So like this kind of sound.
And is there any register restriction on that?
No. Again, lower is going to be better because you have a higher range to go.
We just have a quick question from Sasha. How would you notate that?
With words. With words.
A lot of
arrows.
When all else fails, use words.
You use words and arrows. You put an asterisk next to the note. You put arrows saying that you want it to go up or down or up and down. And you choose the string. So notate the note, notate the direction with an arrow. If you're using Sibelius, it's super easy to do it either up or down. And then underneath you write, take your tuning key and make a slow glissando, a medium glissando, a rapid glissando from, in one direction or however it is that you want it. I'm afraid that's how it's done. For the sort of definitive, well, I shouldn't say definitive because nothing with the harp is, well, there are definitives with the harp, but nothing with harp notation is definitive. There's a book by Carlos Salcedo, which is the book that I have. Maria Daskin gave it to me. Carlos Salcedo was an important harpist and pedagogue in the 20th century. He's the one that gave Stravinsky a hard time for not putting harps in the score of The Rite of Spring, and Stravinsky paid attention to, but he was that important that that Stravinsky actually let him say that. So, and in terms of Me Too, Salcedo is way up there. So just for a little historical perspective. But you can tell a Salcedo student or a student of Salcedo because they have their elbows out like this. And a lot of harpists in Canada play with the Salcedo technique rather than like this with their hands, they're like this. And that's why Canadian harpists tend to play more loudly than harpists in other countries and with a more pointed sound. Where do you stand on Salcedo technique?
I think what's funny is like now with the current generation, this. So I studied with both French techniques, and I studied with Judy, who was Judy Lohman, who was a student of Salcedo's. So even with her teaching, like initially when she started, we were like very high elbows, but then over the years, what I feel like teachers are starting to realize is everyone's body is different. So what worked for maybe Salcedo doesn't work for like someone who's really tiny. So it's all about the sound, but now it's not so strict about like, yeah, the shoulders being really high up.
Okay, I'm just doing a quick Google, and it's actually called a not. It's actually strangely enough, it's called a not. When I go to look for the book online, it's actually called a novel by by Carlos Salcedo.
Oh,
It isn't. It's 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 okay. I'm going into the chat. Here's the book. And he describes the thunder technique. He describes how you make a glissando with that key, how you notate it, how if you're going to play with your fingernails, you notate it. I don't. Almost nobody writes fingernails anymore, do they?
The problem with the fingernails is because you can't. It's hard to like pre-place your fingers, so it's almost like really plucking one at a time. I have a little excerpt here, actually, Barbara Pentland. And it just uses one note fingernail at the top. So hope you can hear the difference. So this also does some PDLT. So we have this sound. So so this is the normal string without the nail sound. And this is the sound with the nail. There's a little bit more bite to it because it's a hard surface against the string.
We just have another notation question. How would you notate that with nails?
That one,
just like your fingernail, like that is the way that Salcedo does it.
Yes.
And he'll do it either he'll do it over every single note if it's just a few notes, or like an 8 via a sign like that for if it's a longer section. So it's like a little crescent moon turned on its side that looks like a fingernail.
Mm-hmm.
Right.
So,
Oh,
no. So I was going to say in this piece, it was notated because it was just the one high A. So can you see that?
A little closer, please. Yes.
Okay. So these are all normal, and then it's just those ones that he wants with, or she wanted with the fingernail sound.
There's a question, does it hurt to play with a fingernail?
No. It doesn't hurt. It's just that you do have to give time to jump around because you need to like get into such a specific position.
Now, Albertina, are there other things that you wanted to show us, or are we ready to take general questions?
I know there had been a question before about like rubbing things on the soundboard. So the thing to remember about the harp, just imagine it's like the wood of the piano or violin. It's probably not going to make any sounds unless it's something like actually scratching the surface, in which case that's not good for the instrument, so you don't want to do that. So what's more effective than rubbing things is like tapping. So tapping, we can just use a knuckle, like, or you can use the whole flat palm of your hand, which gives it a different sound. And what you can even hear is when you're doing that, the strings actually start resonating. And then the other thing you can also do is with fingernails. So those are some effects that are probably more useful with the soundboard effects. Another effect, it is more subtle, but it's brushing against the strings. So again, it's something that you would have to do on the wire strings because that's where you can get some friction. So whereas if I was doing that up here, nothing. Another thing as well is composers writing staccato. So the thing with staccato on the harp is if you want something really short, the sound needs to be muffled. So just say something like this. If you want that staccato, it really has to be, which also limits how fast things can go because you need to like physically stop that string. So generally, a lot of times if people have staccato markings, harpists, they're not necessarily going to give you that super short sound unless you actually physically probably write something about muffling after each sound.
We just have a quick question from the beginning of the class about muffling from Holly. Do you mute everything, or do you mute everything, or can you mute certain notes?
You can mute certain notes. So just say I wanted everything short. Let's just pretend we're doing this. I can do. It just takes some coordination, but you can mute certain notes. The thing that's usually more effective is if you have maybe short left hand notes, but you can. So the left hand was short. And you see that a little bit in Stravinsky where we try to do like short left hand. notes, but then the right hand notes are ringing a bit more. Or the opposite, the left hand note is ringing, but then the right hand is shortening things.
There are some conductors who are really insistent about harpists playing staccato. Kazuyoshi Akiyama's one. Then there are pieces like, is it España is by Chabrier?
Yes.
Yeah. So Chabrier's España, for example, wants this constantly muffled sound, and of course, harpists like to let it ring because it sounds it's more satisfying because it's a more satisfying experience. And I've seen conductors come down on harpists for not constantly muffling. There's some who really like that short sound.
Yeah, because that has a very crisp character, that piece.
There's a question from Holly, I think.
Yes, I just sort of wanted to clarify a little bit about my question from earlier. The symbol with the circle with the X through it, that would communicate to you to muffle everything, to sort of dampen everything. Is yes? That's my question. The part A.
It's generally, so sometimes people will just notate it in the bass clef. And then so, because really it's usually these bass strings that are ringing forever that you want to clear the sound out. Other times, if you really are trying to get total silence, you might put like, and really emphasize that you want it muffled, you would put it in the treble clef and the bass clef. So you would actually see two muffle signs, and then you would just be.
So it sort of applies to the clef that it's attached to.
Yeah,
usually the lower because they're longer. I guess the second question in terms of like, I'm thinking from sort of a percussionist brain space of like, could you play a chord and then sort of mute individual strings that not staccato, but like in between?
Like
yes.
this.
Yeah.
Like that.
So you would just notate how long you want it to ring for, and the harpist would just, oh, that's supposed to be just a half note, I should mute it, sort of situation.
Yeah, so probably if you're wanting certain notes to ring more, it might be more effective also not to write it all as equal durations. Like, so don't write it like a half note, maybe just say we want the outer C's to ring longer than the inner, the E and G. So maybe just put half note for the outer two, but like eighth note for the middle ones, if that makes sense. And then you can put a muffle sign with that. So then that's really clear.
Okay. Thank you so much.
And you can also write, releases very important, or damping should be rhythmically precise, or a little note, even if it's just the once, because just as a courtesy.
Yes.
And a precaution.
Great. Do we have time for another question? We're at 2:00.
So. Oh, here's the question. Is there an opposite marking to près de la table? Do you mean like playing way at the top? Oh, I've done that too. I just write play at the top of the play at the top of the strings. But Albertina, is there something more refined?
It depends what you're meaning by play at the top of the strings. Like there's this little area here. It's not very common to show you. So between where the string stops and up here, there's that short little piece of I guess string length. So is that sort of what you mean by opposite of près de la table? Because really it's not going to change not too much.
Could you do like near the top in the low range? Would that be marked differently? Because you usually play like in the middle, I see, but
yeah, we usually play in the middle. I think the thing is, there's no real difference between playing up really at the top or near the bottom.
okay.
Because they basically, the sound you're getting is because it's closer to the end point of the string. So it's the same on both ends, if that makes sense.
Okay, cool. Thank you. So if one were to notate in that space you talked about where the pin, whatever happens, how would one notate that?
So that one is interesting because I'm not sure if that's a real thing or if like a composer, she made that up, but there is a piece that I played, and what she did was just, I'll show you actually. Can you see this?
Yes.
So it's like a little square with a stick. And then basically the thing is she makes a big explanation on how to work that.
Oh, and would that be above the note or below?
Yep, so that's actually in the little space.
Oh, okay, thank you.
Yeah, so like actually she does a cool effect. So you can hear, so up there, it's not going to be really pitched. And for these ones, actually, it works better in the high register because the strings are a lot thinner, so you can get some movement. Whereas here, I'm going to do something here. So you'll hear the sound bend. Could you hear that shift in the pitch? So what I was doing is I was pushing into that little space between like that upper top bit of string. And because the string is so thin, I'm actually able to tighten the pitch when I'm pushing it. Whereas if I'm down here, it's not going to change anything. Not really noticeable because the string is so thick and it just gets caught in the edge of the peg.
Oh, cool. Thank you.
Okay, we've got a question from Maria Eduarda. Maria Eduarda, when none of the pedals are depressed, the instrument is tuned in C flat, and it is a non-transposing instrument. They will know that that's a C flat. If you want a C natural, you put the pedal in one notch and it raises all of those note names by one semitone, every one of them. And then again, a C sharp, it raises it again, but just that note name. The harp is not a transposing instrument, and they are playing the same string for a C flat, a C natural, and a C sharp. It's the pedal that changes, the string does not. Is that clear?
Yes, it is. Thank you for answering my question. So if I wanted, for example, it will not happen, but if I wanted to write a piece in C major, would I need all the pedals down one notch?
So the pedal,
yes,
you don't necessarily need to do anything, but yes, as the performer, I would have all my pedals down one notch.
Okay, because I read somewhere that only 2 pedals at a time could be pressed in the harp. So
that's for if you're changing the pedals. So I would just preset my pedals. So right now, if you're telling me I'm doing something in C major, I'm in C major. But just say I wanted to change to C sharp and G sharp. So then that would be the two pedal changes that I'm doing.
Okay.
During the piece.
Okay.
That makes sense. Okay.
Sure. And so, sorry, can I?
The has 2 feet.
Yeah, that makes sense. So as a harpist, when would you need to have the pedals notated in the score? And when would it be more comfortable for you to figure out by yourself, like which pedals to use?
I think I think most people kind of prefer just figuring out on their own. The only one time that I really need to know a pedal setup is during a gliss. Because sometimes people want a certain harmony for a gliss, but if they haven't mentioned that, then I'm just going to keep whatever my pedal setup was immediately prior to that.
Got it. And do you prefer to see the diagram or the notes?
I like seeing the diagram in the very beginning. So I'm just going to give you an example. So here, can you see here?
Yes.
That would just be a pedal diagram. So this tells me that I have a D natural, a C natural, a B natural, and then an E natural, an F sharp, G sharp, and an A flat.
Got it.
And then, so as long, like, that's a nice thing just to have in the beginning, but then other things, usually I will change. I will mark things. Sometimes it's nice for the composer to put the pedal changes in, because then that shows that they are kind of aware, or they are also keeping track of what pedals need to be changed. Like the harpist might just change where they actually do the motion, but it's sometimes nice, I think, to at least be aware of, okay, this is coming up.
Okay, perfect. Thank you.
Okay, you're welcome.
We just have one more quick question, and then we should probably let you go, Rodney and Albertina. That is, Sibelius has a harp pedaling plugin. Has that actually proven useful for performers?
I don't know. What do you mean?
Sibelius is
like, that's the composing software, right?
Exactly.
Oh, yes.
So it adds those diagrams in the note presets. That
yes. So I would say, I have gotten pieces where the pedals are marked, like, and I assume they're using some Sibelius program. And yeah, those are helpful.
Great. Well, thank you so much, Albertina and Rodney, and for being extra generous with your time and expertise today. It's so much appreciated. It's such a complex instrument, and I think quite intimidating for young composers to approach, young and old. And so we appreciate you shedding some light on that. And just a reminder to those that are in the mentorship program, you have access to the musicians to ask questions, musicians in the ensemble, as you go through your composition process. So I would encourage you to make use of that if you have further harp questions or about other instruments as well. And we have another workshop next week, next Friday. It's Professional Development Friday, every day, every week in April, rather. And next week we have some folks from the Canadian Music Centre chatting about what the Canadian Music Centre can do for you, and among other things. So we'll have Sean Bickerton and composer Jordan Nobles with us next Friday. So hope you can join us for that. And thanks again. And any applause to Albertina for her beautiful playing, and to Rodney for his expertise. Much appreciation. Thank you so much.
Thanks.
You're very welcome.
All right, and we hope to see you on future workshops. Just drop us a line to save your spot. Thanks a lot. Take care, everyone.
Bye-bye.
Bye.
There we go.